Zela. Zela lived in a small courtyard in an open clearing with grasslands all around. Her grandmother's hut was in the center, the heart of the enclosure. Zela loved to go there and smell the many scents of the bundles of dried herbs hanging on every wall. The hut was dark, yet the darkness had a welcoming warmth. Sometimes her grandmother was burning herbs in a small yellow bowl and singing with her eyes closed. Her grandmother never opened her eyes and never stopped singing, yet she always knew when Zela tried to trick her and tread as quiet as a lion. Her grandmother would motion with her hand for Zela to sit by her side and stroke Zela's head with her fingers. Grandmother was very old. She wore the same sky blue cloth wrapped around her body every day. Her bones seemed to jut out and her skin was dark and wrinkly. Yet grandmother's voice and hands were strong as she sang or wove cloth for the family. Zela knew that grandmother's eyesight was dim and her dwelling was dark, yet the weavings were of lovely colors and a beautiful pattern. Zela never knew how her grandmother created the patterns. Sometimes she wondered if grandmother could see with her fingers and palms. Along with a millet cake, grandmother always had a root or herbal broth ready for Zela to eat or drink. Sometimes the roots were light and crunchy. Some were bitter. Grandmother flavored the herbs with mint, so they were sweet and familiar. Zela knew that the roots and herbs were to strengthen her, and that each concoction was created for a specific purpose as Zela grew and changed. Her grandmother had learned the art of the herbs from her grandmother, who had learned it from her grandmother, and on and on. Zela was being taught the art daily and was often asked to bring back a certain plant on her trip to the river. Zela knew each plant by name and always came back with the right plant. Her grandmother could identify each plant by its smell. Zela brought a pot of clean water to grandmother every day. She would skip and jump barefooted on the soft earth through the well-worn pathway to the winding river, the river of life as her people called it. The path was surrounded by the dense overgrowth of vines and bushes. Upon reaching the broad river, Zela would sit silently and cross-legged on a flat, heart-shaped rock under a large baobab tree and watch the multicolored waterfowl visiting the river's edge. The air was filled with the sounds of their sweet cries and the rushing of water over the round stones. The blue-gray heron was her favorite. Blue, as Zela called her, would stand still on one leg for a long time. Sometimes she would soar with her broad wings, then swoop down for a fish. Zela would pretend she was the heron and stand on one leg in the rushes by the river's edge. Over time, and with much practice, she was able to stand in that position for a long time without moving. She learned that by breathing deeply and slowly, she could balance much longer. In her mind, she was the heron. Her dark-skinned, dark-eyed cousins came to play by the river and called Zela a heron and splashed her. She broke her pose and laughingly splashed back. Soon the children were immersed in the clear waters, joyfully letting their strong bodies swim against the current. After a while, Zela gathered her cloth, rewrapped her body, filled the pot from the swell in the water, which had not been muddied by the children's play, lifted the pot on her head, and silently retraced her steps back to the enclosure and her grandmother's hut. Her grandmother touched Zela's damp head, smiling at the wetness, remembering her own childhood by the river. Grandmother poured a sweet oil from an earthen urn by her bed and rubbed the aromatic oil with her fingers through Zela's thick, dark, curly hair, singing ancient songs of the ancestors. Zela felt loved and safe by her grandmother's side. She loved to sit while her grandmother sprinkled ashes in a circle and sat in the circle, murmuring prayers for her offspring and asking that the ancestors guide them. Her grandmother splashed some of the clean, pure water around the ashen circle. Zela knew that the ashes were for resolution and that the water was to purify. That day, Zela felt the intensity of the prayers more than ever before, and the peaceful presence of the spirits. Grandmother rocked her frail body back and forth as she sang and prayed. Zela curled up on the mat on the earthen floor and slept through the hot afternoon while grandmother went back to her weaving, ever singing. Zela's dreams were filled with the soothing sound of her grandmother's voice. That afternoon, she dreamed of flying with the blue heron over the winding river and out over the sea. The heron dove for fish over and over again, but no fish were to be found. The waves were dark and foaming, the clouds ominously dark. In her dream, Zela could not see the sun. All the while her grandmother sang. This was to be the last afternoon for napping in grandmother's heart hut. The next day's walk to the river would change the course of Zela's life forever. To be continued.